a French court lowered the record 1.1 billion euro antitrust fine on Apple to 317 million euros, basically a third. And Apple came out publicly and said, that's acceptable. Well, hell yeah, it's acceptable. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, October 7th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott, we got to talk about Elon Musk. I have no idea what's going on. I mean, day by day, it seems to flip the actual storyline. So where are we today? I even turned on the news this morning to see what outrageous announcement he made today before we talked.
Well, right. So we are talking on a Friday morning, and most of the news went down over the last couple of days. Musk, I guess you could say, giving in. He probably listened to his lawyers who said, look, you signed a contract to buy this company for $44 billion. You can try to say all you want about, misinformation and due diligence. But the fact is, you had time to do all this. You signed the contract. So he gives in and says, great, let's buy it for $54.20. The original deal after all this time and all these embarrassing text messages. Now Musk says, let's buy it for the actual opening original offer price.
Don't you think he didn't want to pay that price once the stock slumped? And he tried to obfuscate the whole deal.
Right.
But I think Twitter kind of massively came back and pointed out that Elon had mentioned, fake bot tweets long before he started complaining about it. So why didn't he bring it up on the original offer? I just think his lawyer sat him down and said, you don't want to go to trial on this. You're going to lose. And Twitter still wants the deal. I think all of a sudden yesterday, though, they said, no, we're probably going to turn it down now.
It's not that they're probably going to turn it down. I think it hasn't been finalized. And it's almost like when Musk promises when a new car is going to be available or something like that. Until it's in your driveway and you're charging it up and driving it around, you really can't trust that. As successful as his car company is, he's got a different sort of relationship with time, I think, than most people. And I think Twitter understands that and is saying, okay, we're going to keep this court date open just in case. The court responds to that and says, okay, the original date of the 17th of October, which is just in 10 days?
Yeah.
We're going to push that back to the 28th. You two parties now have until the 28th to finalize this thing for real, or you're due back in court. I don't think Musk wants to be in court. I think that's what we learned from his, yes, I'll do this deal, because I think the text messages were embarrassing. I think he realizes that more discovery would be more embarrassing. And I think he just wants to ultimately.
Testimony and the cross will be a nightmare. And I think he knows it.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to be a pretty scene. And we got, a hint of that. I think the people who are in those text messages probably wish that Musk did this, 4 or 5 days earlier before we revealed all those text messages. But nonetheless, that was a little taste, I think, of what he can expect in court. And I think he thought better of it and said, let's avoid court, which, for people like you and me is always a good idea.
So he's on the hook now for, if this goes through, $30 billion, his share.
Right? Well, right. And then we have to figure one of Twitter's hesitancies, I think, is that they haven't seen all the money and they're wondering if Musk can get all the financing together. And perhaps he hasn't proven to them adequately that he's done that. That would be my guess. And that's going to be a challenge. $44 billion is a big deal if it's one giant company buying another giant company. For one person to do it, it's a staggering amount of money. And, for all of his fortune in Tesla and the sort of virtual fortune in SpaceX and all that, he's had to go out and raise money as an individual, as a popular individual, but still as one person. And that is challenging. And now he has to convince those people, yes, I'm going through with this, so I really need those checks. I really need those money transfers soon.
Other people are still in the game?
I think other people are still in the game.
Okay. So Now he puts out a tweet that talks about X. Did you see the X tweet?
Yes.
Which is, oh, well, Twitter, I put it like he's putting a good face on it. Twitter's a good deal because X, the universal app, this puts me 3 to 5 years further into the pursuit of that app because because Twitter exists and it's got this huge body of users and all that. So all of a sudden, Twitter, the damaged company, is now the perfect launch pad for my next big plan. Do you buy that?
And I think that is putting a spin on it for investors because Twitter is Twitter and it's going to take some maintenance on its own. This whole super app idea has been around for a while where, you'd have social, you'd have payments, you'd have money transfer, all that stuff. But each of those things is a challenge, as we've seen with apps that do it individually. And also there's the data challenge. One thing I was thinking about as I was listening to all this is Twitter is really the one company that hasn't come under fire nearly as much as the other social media companies for data leaks and even concerns about data. And I must say, as an active Twitter user myself, I don't feel that they know all that much about me in order for me to get involved in doing my job and putting news out on Twitter. And that's a very positive thing. So if you get into payments, though, and money transfers and whatever X is going to be, you're asking people to give up a lot more data on a site that so far has not demanded it. And so that's a big challenge going forward. X.com, by the way, many of you out there in Silicon Valley will know, was the original name for PayPal. So perhaps Musk has kept that domain name and thought, ooh, someday I'll unleash X on the world. and maybe this is part of the plan.
I'm old enough to remember that the electronics industry is kind of like the old stereo music industry, where you go through a phase where the only good thing to have is components. And then all of a sudden they put them all together into one universal box. It sits in your living room, and then that becomes déclassé, and you have to have individual components again. And I've noticed that the industries tend to consolidate like that into a universal solution, and then it breaks apart again because universal solutions are always less than the sum of their parts. Because you can't get all the pieces right. And it sounds like Elon's trying to become the one size fits all solution. He's going back to Yahoo, if you think about it, because that was their core philosophy.
Right. And the reason ultimately that they sort of failed and lost relevance. You're right. I mean, there's an app economy right now that we've all sort of bought into that allows us to do very specific things simultaneously, even, not to mention at different times on our phones. And I don't know that the super app is necessary. I mean, even with, say, Apple Pay on your phone, it's like, whoa, I can pay for things on my phone. That's fantastic. But that's just one thing that lives on your phone. And whether you use PayPal or Square or whatever, it's all one thing. The idea of this super app that's going to do everything, to me, the first thing that jumps out is all the data that you would need, and therefore the privacy concerns. But also, like you say, it's sort of an idea that has passed. It has come, but it has also gone, and we haven't really seen it come back.
Right. And unless they can offer enormous network effects by tying all this thing into one place, what's the point? I mean, our computers are so fast, we jump back and forth between apps without even thinking about it.
Right.
So in a sense, we already have a pseudo ultimate app. It's just called a whole bunch of different names and put out by a whole bunch of different companies.
Right.
It's
true.
So you think there's a deal going to go through? I think it has to go through.
I mean, yeah, at this point, I think it has to go through. And even more importantly, I think both sides want it to go through. If you're a shareholder, it doesn't really matter what the Twitter board of directors says anymore. You've seen your wealth increase by a ton over the last couple of days. You want that 54-20. So the board of directors really has to answer to those shareholders. And if you're Musk, I assume you've seen the light because of your lawyer saying, look, don't go, into court on this. It's just going to be embarrassing. And you probably don't have a case. Why give up even more embarrassing stuff when you're just going to have to cough up a big check anyway? And so the idea that Musk is already saying, hey, look what I can do with this, seems to be a future, a look into the future. And that's positive for any deal.
Okay, so there's one other set of stakeholders in all this. And I got a great note from Grove predicting what would happen, what's going to happen with the employees of Twitter, because as you know, as he said, the children of Twitter, they don't want to work for Musk because Musk is going to take away a lot of their power. They're going to have to show up to work every day. You know, they're not going to be able to censor people they don't like. You know, if Musk is correct or honest about being a real First Amendment guy, they don't want to be there, but they want to get their stock. They want to sell that stock because they're seeing a big payday. And then Bob predicted what's going to happen next is there's going to be a giant exit of Twitter employees. And then there's going to be a few weeks later, a few months later, an explosion of exposés and claims and everything else telling the real story about Twitter by angry ex-employees who now don't care because they're rich. They can say what they want.
I mean, that's possible. Who knows what, if there are super angry stories to tell. The employees I know are actually pretty happy with Twitter and happy with what they've become. And for the most part, we're a little nervous about Elon Musk. I think what you and Bob said about the money is really going to change things. Often when there's a change in ownership, you vest instantly. So all those people have their money. They can walk.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. There's no waiting period. There's no vesting period or lockout or anything else. That works with stock options.
Right.
That's how they get you on stock options. But a sale, that's cash on the barrelhead.
Right. So they can walk now. And I assume many of them will, not just because it's Elon Musk, but because they've been there many years and they just got a big fat payday and they can go somewhere else, as opposed to hanging around in a company with a gigantic question mark, you know, hanging over its head. You know, who knows if it stays public, where the stock goes from here, if he wants to take it private, how do those people get paid? You know, Musk is going to make some changes. That's what he does. I think the biggest question is not, do employees leave? Because I think many of them do. But, you know, who does Musk choose to run the company now? I don't think he'll do it himself.
No, I hope not. He's spread too thin already.
Right.
Okay, well, you know, keep following the news, folks. You know, a weekly podcast. We have trouble keeping up with the breaking news like Elon Musk news because it changes by the hour, sometimes by the minute. Oh, he also pissed off the Ukraine by coming out with some big peace plan that essentially is status quo ante for Russia. You know, let him have Crimea, promise to stay out of NATO, all those things. And he got seriously slammed for that.
Yeah, stay out of it was the comment you heard the most.
Like, yeah, exactly. Including from the government of Ukraine, right? Including one very profane comment by a minister. Yes. But then on the other hand, there's the magic. Skynet does this incredible light show. What was it, a dragon in the air out of a formation of their satellites? I mean, it was incredible. It was like we got a real glimpse of maybe the 22nd century, you know, and that was very cool. Though some people pointed out, if you're a tribesman in the Amazon who really has no contact with civilization, and you look up and see a giant star dragon in the sky, you may have a new set of gods. You know, I mean, it may change everything. It could be Armageddon for these tribesmen in their minds.
True, but they are blissfully unaware of the Twitter drama, so they get that on their side.
They're blessed in that way. Okay. Elizabeth Holmes, your favorite person. Now, what's going on there?
So this was a strange week for her as well, and that trial that still rolls on. And this all goes back, just a quick bit of background to, you know, her sentencing was set also for October 17th. Right. Recently, Adam Rosendorf, who was really the chief witness against her and also an early source for John Carreyrou, the Wall Street Journal reporter, in his book. So call him the guy who took down Elizabeth Holmes, former lab director of Theranos. And think about it. This is a company famous for...
This is the guy that crawled on his knees up to his house begging for her
forgiveness. Yeah, so Rosendorf, the former lab director, allegedly, according to Holmes's partner who opened the door, knocked on Holmes's door, penitent, feeling bad about how things turned out, and then was sent away. But the lawyers jumped on it and said, perhaps he's recanting his testimony. The prosecutors who won the case have got to be face planting at this point. They quickly got Rosendorf to sign something that says, no, I stand by all my testimony. Doesn't really matter if he does or not. He gave it, you know, but he does sign something that says yeah, I stand by all this. But the lawyers nonetheless say, hey, this smells fishy. We need another trial.
Oh, God.
And the judge, instead of just dismissing this, because remember, this trial lasted a long time, has said, okay, on October 17th, instead of a sentencing hearing, we will hear motions to decide whether there should be any changes because of what Adam Rosendorf allegedly did. Meanwhile, the sentencing, if it still stands, has been put off until sometime between November and mid-January, which means we could be in 2023 by the time we wrap this thing up.
So if there's,
And as if on cue,
we get to see Scott Budman standing in the cold rain, waiting to get into the courtroom at 4:30 in the morning.
Another season of, yeah, who knows? And that may very well be the point. And also,
You're
as if
going
on
to
cue,
be getting Social Security before Elizabeth Holmes does time. I just have that feeling they're going to delay this thing. They're going to obfuscate. They're going to throw in, everything but the kitchen sink, trying to keep her out of jail or out of probation or whatever they're going to give her.
yeah, it seems like that's the goal, is to desperately avoid sentencing. And it's interesting, Sunny Balwani jumps on this and says, if Adam Rosendorf's testimony was somehow suspect in the Holmes case, he also testified in my case. I want to be part of this October 17th hearing. So after all this time, not only is everything a little bit up in the air, but now both want in on the same hearing after they didn't get along. They were so at loggerheads, they had to be kept apart the whole time. Now they want in on the same hearing. So that could be a really interesting day.
Well, that would be interesting. That would be worth going to. Is it going to be an open hearing?
I'm sorry?
Open hearing?
Yeah, that's the plan. And
we're
that's how
actually going to see the two defendants in the same courtroom together
if they indeed
for the first time.
Well, I think they might have been there, not during the trials themselves, but for some early stuff, while they determined that they needed separate trials. So this would be, I don't want to use the term historic. It's not historic. It would be interesting.
Every courtroom artist in America is salivating at the prospect of being able to draw the two of them together in one single image.
Right. And I don't even know if the judge is going to let that happen, but we know where Elizabeth Holmes is going to be and her attorneys. And again, Balwani just releasing a statement yesterday saying he wants in on that action. And all because of one strange visit by the lab director. This has all been thrown into chaos yet again. And the judge, to his credit, didn't seem to want to give a whole lot of credence to this. But look, he canceled postponed the sentencing, and now is going to hear at least one side of the story again on the 17th.
The rest of this month is going to be crazy, isn't it? And meanwhile, AMD, the shining light of the last few years, posts a warning on its earnings. They claimed that their demand has gone soft and supply side problems too. I mean, AMD was besides NVIDIA, I mean, that's what everybody staked everything on for the health of the industry.
Yeah, no, this was a big drop for NVIDIA, or excuse me, for AMD. And it's interesting. We're getting these economic indicators also by the day, where gas prices shoot higher and then they come down. Inflation trying to, they're fighting inflation with new interest rate hikes. Just this morning, the job numbers, not all that bad. Our unemployment rate actually drops. Yeah. The stock market drops because they think, that means there's still going to be inflationary times. We need another interest rate hike, which is bad for stocks. Meanwhile, how's the supply chain? Well, Tesla seems to be delivering cars, but AMD says it's causing it to, miss its numbers. So even by individual companies, we're hearing different news, and it's really by the day. And I can understand why the stock market has fallen so far. There's really so much uncertainty right now as to what's going to happen next.
And I heard an economist say everybody's worried about inflation right now, but what we should be worried about is recession. I thought, oh, good. I'm glad we brought that word up again. I mean, here we are. I noticed want ads from Intel, so companies are still hiring, even if they're having bad quarters.
Right. We haven't seen the big layoffs yet. We've seen a dip in job openings. And we have had a lot of companies, famously Meta and others, saying, okay, we're going to hire freeze hiring and get ready for cuts. And so we're all sitting here ready for the cuts, but they haven't really come in large numbers yet, except for the companies that are truly, truly struggling with, Coinbase, Peloton. They're
Yeah.
shedding a ton of jobs, but that, let's be honest, they're really hurting.
10,000 person layoff at Applied Materials. I mean, that's usually the bellwether.
Right.
Is semiconductor equipment companies take the first shot, and I haven't seen any softening there.
No, and AMD's announcement was not layoffs. It was, we're looking ahead to the future and we see a weak outlook. PC sales are down, which is understandable. I mean, everything costs more right now because of interest rate hikes. As far as going into debt costs more. So if you're going to finance some gifts or some technology, it's going to cost you more to pay that off. And AMD is looking at that and saying, this might be a slower holiday season than expected. People might not being as much may not buy as much technology as we thought, and therefore they might not need our chips. So that's several steps away from, right, we're laying off thousands of people. But if this sort of thing continues, don't you eventually have to trim your sales as a company?
You have to. And, this is one of those eras where we're getting so many mixed signals that people tend to, when they see mixed signals, a certain fraction of the population stays optimistic. They look at the good news and not the bad. And the other half of the population looks at the bad news and says, we're in real trouble right now. And I don't know. I mean, if anybody's depending upon the Fed raising interest rates before an election, we're a month from the election. I've never seen that historically. Have you?
No, and it's
supposed to want to interfere with the election,
right? But I think if that's the one thing the Fed can do to lower inflation, even those who are running for office are saying we don't want inflation. So it's
oh yeah,
they're almost trying to help out. But right, it's just such an uncertain situation. We really haven't seen prices drop so much. Companies are still hiring. The latest job number was pretty good, but everybody is worried about the future for all sorts of reasons, and I think that's why the markets are tumbling.
Okay, another news. A French court lowered the record 1.1 billion euro antitrust fine on Apple to 317 million euros, basically a third. And Apple came out publicly and said, that's acceptable. Well, hell yeah, it's acceptable. I mean, that's coffee money at Apple.
I think they said it was acceptable, but we'd rather dismiss the charges as a whole. They're still trying to appeal.
They're still trying, but they're doing high fives there. They didn't want the bad publicity of $1 billion euro fine,
right,
for antitrust. No one cares about 371 billion fine. So Apple's happy, and the Europeans and their judgment on American competitors is always screwy. So everybody seems to come out okay all this. The EU gets to claim, well, we caught Apple, and Apple gets to laugh and go have lunch. Next, you talked about the holiday season. We're getting close now. I mean, we're 2 months roughly from Christmas, and Black Friday is coming, 5 weeks? What's your guess? Is there anything out there that's so appealing that it's going to get consumers into the stores to buy electronics? And we'll get into the Google Watch, the Android Watch, in a second. But
right, I was going to say there are plenty of
sexy enough.
Right.
Are there?
No. There's nothing all that new. There are plenty of phones if you want a phone, and the prices have stayed stable because of inflationary concerns. There are plenty of watches if you want to watch. Plenty of laptops and
but
tablets,
etc. Those things as replacement. Nobody's buying their first iPhone this year. They're buying it because they got to get a new one.
Right. No, I don't think there's anything all that must have driving people to the stores. And that's a smart strategy, because I think if things continue on this uncertain path and people are concerned about their net wealth, their jobs, their stock options, et cetera, they may curb spending. And I think companies have to understand that this could be a rather disappointing holiday season when it comes to that. And I think they are, the iPhone coming out without a price hike is no accident, and that's important, and that's a sign. These Android phones are going to underprice the Apple products. That's no accident. So I think it's going to be a holiday season where most people still have their jobs and still have some money to spend, and that's good. But they may hold back a bit just because early 2023 is looking a little concerning.
What do you think about this antitrust stuff that's going through Congress right now, going after the tech industry? I mean, we have a person from the Tech Oversight Project who's essentially pushing this. Said, quote, "Big tech never loses a legislative fight," and they just did. Congress went 242 to 184 for some of these various anti-competition fights against high tech. You think there's anything there, or is big tech actually won again? Now they took a lot of the teeth out of the bill, but it's still there.
Yeah, the word I was going to use for antitrust was actually toothless. So far, they haven't made a dent, and they haven't frightened these companies enough to change them. And I don't know when or if that will ever happen. And interestingly enough, antitrust, against these companies like TikTok and the China concerns are the one thing that really unites both parties in America. And so you'd think this would be a time when there were a lot of teeth for the SEC and these, agencies that are watching over tech. For some reason, they haven't done, well, almost anything. They just haven't done much to curb the monopolistic tendencies, to curb these guys from getting super rich and treating their workers badly. I'm surprised by this. Privacy concerns are still, front and center. And even while you have both sides uniting, saying, yes, we need more strength and more teeth on this, it just hasn't happened yet. And that's disappointing.
Yeah, well, you know what happened. I mean, the lobbyists for these giant companies went and visited the offices of all these, congressmen and said, that Amazon factory we have in your district? Well, what if we were to move that to Texas? Boom. We know how the vote's going to go after that. I'm sure that all those companies did a full court press through their lobbyists on the Hill and got this thing, yeah, go ahead and pass it, but just take the guts out of it. I'm not sure. These companies are so big, I'm not sure now we can stop them in any serious way.
Well, right. And I think that's what these agencies need to do. They need to crack down if we are truly concerned about, say, Amazon workers or the janitors at Meta, or, market factors that lead to monopoly, anything. I'd settle for not much here. I just, we reporters are talking about all these things. And I think the sense out there from the people who are watching or streaming is that, hey, great, nothing's being done about it. And granted, there are concerns that these people have. Hey, what about high gas prices and inflation and all that are very legitimate, but also, the privacy and the concerns that young people should be having and should be heard when it comes to these social media sites. And we're just not doing anything about them.
Okay, real quick before we go, did you cover the Android watch?
I saw it. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think competition is good. I'm glad to see them.
Bezel on it though, right? I mean, it looks a little bit old fashioned.
It does. More of the sort of the round instead of the square. And that's a good move to make it look a little bit different, to maybe go a little less tech in its look, because I think that's one of the criticisms of, say, the Apple Watch. And I don't know how well they'll sell, but again, more competition is good, not just for pricing, but it makes Apple and the big guys say, hey, we have to do even better.
Is the user interface interesting or novel or innovative? There was something about turning the outside of it.
Yeah, you do it a little differently than Apple's sort of bezel or whatever they call that. And it's all good. It's all good ideas. I look forward to getting my hands on one of these and trying it out. But look, the Android products, while as an aggregate sell a lot, don't have, other than some of the individual Samsungs, a super breakout star. And right. I don't expect this watch to be a super breakout star. The wearable industry just isn't yet. But I think the more we stress things like
stake in the ground by Google, just we're in that game too.
Yeah. And I think that's important. It's important to have a platform there because as we get stronger when it comes to both features, particularly healthcare, these could be important devices.
.com. We've got to have really sophisticated watches now. How much does it cost?
I don't even know. Let me look that up. That's a good question.
You mean, this is that new trend of announcing products without announcing a price on it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's so early in the game that, Android, like you say, really just wants to put down a stake in the ground and say, hey, we've got, a Pixel watch. And it looks more
right before Christmas.
Yeah, so $350 is its opening price.
Oh, okay.
Which is, that's a little bit less than the Apple Watch. It's a good move. It will be interesting to see if people this holiday season who say, gosh, I really want a smartwatch, I want to try it out. This might be a good entree. And especially if you already have an Android phone of some kind, it'll probably pair up nicely. And it's not that expensive in the grand scheme of things if you want to, test your physical fitness, test your heart rate, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we'll have to go into the local Pete's or Starbucks and look around, because I remember when the iWatch came out, it seemed like every early adopter had one. They were wearing short sleeve shirts just to show it. I'm curious if that's going to happen with this one.
Not as, my guess is not as much, but again, if you've had an Android phone, and there are billions of people out there with them, you've been waiting for this. Let's give it a try, I say.
Okay, well, we're running out. We're past time, but Meta real quick, because we haven't mentioned them at all. I saw another Metaverse TV, science fiction ad on TV. It seems so anachronistic now. I found myself laughing that they're still trying to push this thing, and I don't know who it's being pushed to. It looks like it's being pushed to school kids. Like, we'll have it for you when you're an adult, or maybe it's for companies that are proudly announcing in their press releases, oh, we're going to be in the metaverse, even though there's nothing there. I mean, why is Zuckerberg still pushing this TV commercial campaign, trying to change your minds?
I don't know. The company is talking less about this than it has about anything. There's clearly dissension inside. I don't know that there's a market for this. Honestly, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I'm wondering why they've sunk so much of the company's fortune into something that we've kind of seen and rejected before. So I just can't figure this out. And again, I'm not a teenager, right? I'm not a teenager shopping at the mall in the metaverse. I'm not the target market. I get it. But look, I know teens. I live with teens. Nobody's excited about this metaverse in my world. So give it time, I guess, because they've got such a huge investment in it. But I haven't seen anything to turn my head about it yet.
I bet they introduced the metaverse about the same time that we finally get a resolution of the Elizabeth Holmes case.
That'll be the bet. Which one comes first?
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.